The scariest thing isn't when someone remembers differently than you. It's when they remember exactly what you try to forget. In Episode 1, we follow Claire. A young woman returned to her childhood home after nearly 10 years away. There, she stumbled upon an old notebook hidden in the attic. Inside were 7 names, along with chilling warning. Choose only one to forgive. Claire began with the first name, Mrs. Lorna, her former neighbor, and from that moment, a long-buried memory began to surface. A night when she ran away from her own home, and no one ever truly knew what happened. But the more terrifying truth was this: Claire didn't remember either. Episode 1 ended as she looked down at the next name, Mr. Gavin, her senior year literature teacher, who had once been forced to resign after an incident Claire could no longer name. Claire Harper stood before the rusted blue-gray gate, facing a wooden house on the outskirts of town, about a 30-minute drive from where she lived. No one answered the door, but she didn't knock. She just stood there, silent, as if waiting for herself to step out from within. Since her visit with Mrs. Lorna, something had shifted, not a clear memory, but an echo, a hollow that had opened inside her mind. The name Mr. Gavin in the notebook no longer felt like just a person. It felt like the title of something that had never been spoken aloud. Claire remembered him only vaguely, her senior year literature teacher, who left the school suddenly after an incident. No one ever said what. She didn't remember either. But every time she saw his name, her stomach felt hollow. She had gone to the Old Town Library, a strange meeting place where truant teenagers once crossed paths with elderly patrons searching for lost lines of Rilke. The librarian, a soft-voiced woman in her 50s, told her that Mr. Gavin still lived nearby, but he no longer spoke to anyone. "He still reads," she said. "The library sends him books every month. Same day, same hour, like he lives on his own private clock." Claire asked for his address. As the librarian wrote it down on a small slip of paper, her hand trembled slightly. Claire didn't ask why. She just folded the paper, tucked it into her pocket, and walked out of the library like someone who had just been handed a mission they never signed up for. That afternoon, she stood in front of the house, like now. The wind moved gently. The trees trembled. And she stood still, as if afraid that one more step would break the seal and let the truth pour out like a gust of cold air from a door no longer locked. She stepped onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked beneath her. She didn't knock, just laid her hand on the doorknob. And in that instant, the door opened. No sound, no one behind it. It simply opened, as if whoever was inside had always known she would come. Inside Mr. Gavin's house was the amber glow of a time long gone, old porcelain lamps, books stacked by habit rather than theme, and the scent of aged paper mixed with rotting wood. He sat in an armchair beside the fireplace, as if he hadn't moved from that spot in years. He wasn't surprised to see her. He didn't ask, "Who are you?" or "Why are you here?" He just looked at her. His gaze held no anger, no chill, just fatigue. Claire said nothing. She sat across from him, holding the notebook that had become her constant companion these past few days, resting it gently on her lap. "I knew this day would come," he said, his voice still hoarse and low, just like in those old literature classes, when the whole room fell silent as he read a passage in The Great Gatsby. Claire tried to recall it, but no clear images surfaced, only sound, his voice, rain against the windows, her heart pounding fast for some unnamed reason. "Do you remember?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. She looked down at the notebook, flipped back to the first page, stopped at the familiar line. Choose one to forgive. Only one. He exhaled softly. I used to think you wrote that for me. The words hit like a silent blade. Claire looked at him, really looked, for the first time in her life, not as a teacher, not as a shadow tied to some half-formed memory, but as a man. His eyes held something like an apology, but he didn't speak it aloud. Claire felt like she had stepped onto an old stage, where the play had ended long ago, but the props still stood in place, and she no longer knew what role she had once played. Claire felt the air in the room grow dense, as if she were sitting inside a memory tighter than time itself. She did remember exactly what led to Mr. Gavin's departure from the school. Just that one morning, people whispered more than usual, and his name disappeared from the faculty list as if it had never been there. She had once assumed he left by choice, burnout, or illness. But now, seeing him sitting before her, his eyes didn't hold sickness. They held consequence. I used to believe you were pretending to forget, he said, voice steady and low, like someone reading out a verdict meant for himself. But now, I'm not so sure. Claire clenched her hands. She didn't know what he was talking about, and the frightening part was she didn't dare ask. He told her. One afternoon during senior year, she had come to see him in the teacher's lounge, panicked, trembling, said she didn't want to go home anymore. She hadn't explained why. Didn't cry. Just said, I can't sleep there one more night. Claire tried to picture it, but her mind slid like wet glass. The harder she reached, the faster it vanished. I asked if you wanted him to call someone, he continued. You shook your head. Then you left. 2 days later, the school received an anonymous letter from a parent accusing Mr. Gavin of inappropriate behavior toward a female student. There was no proof, but the letter included a handwritten note that exactly matched an essay Claire had submitted the week before. They called it a passive signature, and that was enough for suspension. Claire looked up, face pale. I didn't, she began and stopped, because she truly didn't remember. She wasn't sure if she sent that letter, wasn't sure who had used her handwriting, wasn't even sure if she had ever actually told him anything. I didn't do that, she said, this time firmly. He gave a small nod, his face unreadable. I know. Others didn't need to know. They just needed to believe what was easiest to believe. Claire bit her lip. In her mind, a question rose. So who knew? And who wanted him gone before someone else could be seen? Claire stayed silent for a long time, her mind caught between two things. What Mr. Gavin had said, and the truth her body was slowly beginning to remember. There were no clear images, but there were sensations. That feeling lived in the sound of footsteps behind her while she read, in the soft knock at her door at 1 a.m., in the time she wrote a small note and stuffed it into her backpack. If I disappear, don't ask why. Claire didn't remember who it was meant for, or if anyone ever read it, but her hand had written it. She could feel the ink, the smell of the paper, and the tremble in her fingers. Do you know what happened after that? Mr. Gavin asked. Claire shook her head. He spoke slowly. After being suspended, he moved here and cut ties with everyone. No lawsuits, no explanations. I thought if someone needed the truth, they'd come find it, he said. Now you've come, but you don't know why you're here. That sentence tapped softly against Claire's chest, not painful, but enough to make everything tremble. Why didn't you fight back? She asked, her voice, for the first time, missing a beat. Because I was afraid, he answered without pause. Afraid that if I fought, I might end up hurting you even more. Claire froze. You were afraid of me? She asked. No, he said, eyes steady on hers. I was afraid the truth lived somewhere you weren't ready to name. She bit her lip hard. A flash of memory. Her desk, a hastily written note. Someone walking in without knocking. The smell of antiseptic. A hand holding a glass of water. Her eyes burning. Her heart racing. Her fingers starting to shake. It no longer slipped away like before. The memory was coming back, not clearly, but with sharp edges. And it wasn't arriving in pictures. It was arriving in feeling. The room felt still as Claire sat frozen, her hands resting on the notebook, without even realizing she was touching it. The air thickened, as if every speck of dust in the house had paused to quietly witness the conversation slicing deep into memory. Mr. Gavin said nothing more. He waited. Claire knew that, and it was that silence that frightened her. Not because he was waiting for an answer, but because he believed the answer was starting to rise within her, not in words, but in feeling, in the raw data of memories not yet decoded. Claire tried to keep her breathing steady, but waves of something vague kept rising, as if beneath the surface of her calm was a storm that had never settled. She saw again the flicker of fluorescent lights in the school hallway, heard the bells signaling the next class, and in the middle of that sound, something happened. Someone called her name. Someone placed a hand on her shoulder while she was hunched over her desk. A cold sensation slid down her spine. No clear face, no clear hand, but unmistakably, something was wrong. "You didn't say anything when you came back to school," Mr. Gavin said, as if continuing a thought she hadn't voiced. No explanation, no questions, no eye contact. I walked away down the hall, and you passed me like I was a stranger. Claire remembered, not the image, but the feeling. When she saw him from a distance, her heart pounded, and she turned away, not out of anger, but out of fear. But fear of what? She lifted her head, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Do you think what happened had something to do with you?" she asked, the words spilling out like a dare to herself. He paused, then shook his head very slightly. "No," he said, "but others did. And sometimes other people's belief is enough to destroy what you haven't had the chance to protect." That sentence brought back something Claire had once heard, maybe from her mother, maybe someone else. If everyone believes it, right or wrong doesn't matter anymore. Mr. Gavin leaned forward, pulled an old paper packet from the drawer beside his chair, and handed it to her. Claire unfolded it. A copy of the anonymous letter that led to the suspension. She looked at the handwriting, almost like hers, but not too round, too perfectly aligned. She had never written that way, but it included a quote from one of her essays, word for word. Claire felt like she was staring at a counterfeit version of herself, close enough to raise doubt, but off just enough to know it wasn't real. "Someone took your essay," he said, "and made me look guilty with just a few lines." Claire trembled. Who could do that, and why? Claire placed the letter on the table, as if it had just burned her hand. She didn't say anything, just stared at the empty space between her and the former teacher, where something like trust had once existed, even if she couldn't remember exactly what it was. She remembered writing a lot when she was 17, hurried journal entries, sentences never submitted. Maybe one of them had been taken. Maybe she had given away, in desperation, in a moment of reaching out she no longer recalled. And the scariest part was maybe someone had helped her in a way that ended up hurting them. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice so soft it barely formed words. Mr. Gavin smiled, but not with joy. "I know, but sometimes silence speaks louder than any accusation." Claire nodded. She understood that better than anyone. All those years, she had lived inside that silence like an escape. But now it felt like a room with no doors, and she was locking herself inside it. "Are you angry at me?" she asked very slowly, like someone loosening each knot in her throat. Mr. Gavin didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, where the treetops swayed in the twilight light. "I used to be," he said, "because I lost everything over something I didn't do. But then I realized I was angry at someone who was already in pain, and that didn't lead me anywhere." Claire lowered her head. No tears, just an emptiness in her chest. not the emptiness of loss, but the kind that comes when something has been cleared to make space for something truer. She opened the notebook, looked at his name, didn't cross it out, didn't circle it, just placed the tip of her pen on it, then paused. "I can't forgive you yet," she said. "Not because you did something wrong, but because I haven't forgiven the person who let you be hurt. And that person is me." He didn't reply, but for the first time, he gave a slight nod. And Claire knew some wounds don't need bandages. They just need to be seen for what they are. Claire stood up in the chair, not hurried, not hesitant, as if her body already knew that endings weren't about doors closing, but about recognizing the moment you're quiet enough inside to walk away. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. The silence in the room had already spoken for her. Apology, gratitude, and acknowledgement. Mr. Gavin didn't rise to see her out either. He simply gave the faintest nod, his eyes no longer those of a man wronged, but of someone finally seen after years of being erased from someone else's story. Claire stepped out of the house. The late afternoon breeze carried the scent of dry leaves and a fading light. Not harsh, but clear enough to see herself in her own shadow. She walked along the dirt road that led out of the town's edge. No phone, no map, no thought to where she'd go next. All that lingered in her mind was a single image, her own uneven handwriting, scribbled beneath Mr. Gavin's name in the notebook, not someone else's. Her own, written, forgotten, and now relearning how to take responsibility without punishing herself for remembering. Back at the old house, Claire didn't open the notebook right away. She made a cup of tea, poured it into the porcelain mug her mother once used, and sat down at the living room table. The house felt quieter, not because it was cleaner or less haunted, but because she no longer entered it like someone digging up the past to assign blame. She was learning how to become the one who tells a story, slowly, honestly, and with compassion. When she opened the notebook, she didn't cross out Mr. Gavin's name. She didn't mark the corner like she had with Mrs. Lorna either. She simply turned the page, then slipped a blank sheet between them. On it, she wrote a single line. "Not everyone who hurts you means to." Then folded it, placed it inside, closed the notebook. She didn't need to forgive just yet, but she knew sometimes simply naming what happened is how you begin. That night, Claire lay in her old room, the window open, the breeze gently stirring the curtain like the slow breath of memory just soothed. She didn't turn on the light, didn't play any music. She just lay there, hand on her stomach, eyes on the ceiling where the childhood glow-in-the-dark stars still dotted the surface. Faded marks of what used to be light in the dark. Nothing was clearer after seeing Mr. Gavin. If anything, it was murkier. But for the first time, she didn't feel trapped in that murkiness. She was standing inside it, eyes open and not trying to run. She thought about what Mr. Gavin had said. I was angry at someone who was already hurting. And she wondered how many times in her life she had done the same, stayed silent out of fear of hurting someone, only to watch everything fall apart because of that silence. How many people had left, not because she caused them pain, but because she didn't have the courage to keep them with the truth? Claire didn't have the answers, but now she knew to ask the questions, and that was the biggest difference. She opened the notebook again. The next page, the name appeared, clear, legible, as if waiting. Becca Rowe, her best friend at 17. The one who knew every nighttime panic. The one who stayed silent for her when the world demanded explanations. And then, one day, Becca disappeared. No reason, no message, no return. Claire placed her hand on that name. No trembling, no avoidance. She only felt one thing with absolute clarity. If Mr. Gavin was the door back to memory, then Becca might be the one holding the key, not to unlock what had already been locked away, but to open what Claire had chosen not to face for years, the part of memory tied to her family, and maybe to herself. The wind outside the window grew stronger. Claire pulled the blanket to her chest, gently close her eyes. Tomorrow, she would find Becca, but this time not to ask, "Do you remember?" but to say, "I think I finally do." If you've ever felt a deep ache over something you can't quite remember, or carried a quiet guilt you've never found the words to name, share it in the comments. You might not be as alone as you once believed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to keep following Claire as she opens each name one by one. Every episode is a piece of memory, and no piece is ever small if it once kept you silent. In the next episode, Claire will come face to face with the person who once knew her best at 17. Someone who may know more than even Claire herself remembers. And this time, the truth won't just come from memory, but from a letter she once wrote and forgot she ever sent.